Hi, my name is Becky Lawrence and I'm of Czech heritage, and today I'm going to show you how to make a traditional Czech apple strudel. This recipe came over on the boat with my grandfather, his mother, and two sisters back in 1880 when they landed in Ellis Island. They immigrated over to Silver Lake, Minnesota. My mom learned the recipe and taught it to my family when we were children. I'm going to show you how to prepare the dough for the Czech apple strudel. We have chosen McIntosh, Haralson, and caramel red apples. You can choose whatever variety you would like, but we chose 3 varieties because it adds to the complexity of the flavor of the strudel. First of all, we have 1 cup of lukewarm milk. I'm going to add into the mixer 2 eggs, room temperature so that it doesn't slow down the warming of the dough. There we go, 2 eggs. Next we have a 1/2 cup of butter, also room temperature for ease in incorporating it into the dough. Back in the day when the recipe was passed on to us, they used to use lard for the component of the fats, and we have switched over to butter because the lard today in the stores is not as fresh and clean flavored as butter would be. We have 2 tablespoons of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. Next, I'm going to mix into the flour. It calls for 4 cups plus whatever it takes to make the dough into a dough that is soft but not too sticky. So this is the 1st cup. Notice I'm using a rough cut. I'm not cleaning it off with a knife because it's more or less 4 cups of flour that you're using. There's 3 cups. And 4 cups. So now I'm watching it mixed and seeing how well it's incorporating and how it's holding to the mixer's paddle. It's sticky still from what I can see, so I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of flour at a time. I want it to release from the mixer stand a little bit. I'm going to turn it up so it mixes a little bit more vigorously with the whole of the dough. And I'm just going to stop it to see how it feels. It's still a little bit sticky, so I'm going to start it up again and add another 1/4 cup of flour to the dough. The reason I'm checking for stickiness is to make sure when it comes to rolling it out on the tablecloth that it doesn't stick to the tablecloth despite our using flour on the tablecloth to prevent it from sticking. If you were doing this by hand, you would want to knead the dough for about 10 to 15 minutes. But since we're doing it by mixer, it's not needed that long. I'm turning it off to feel it. I like that tackiness. It's slightly sticky, but not very sticky at all. So I think we're done. I pull it off. There we go. You can see how it's still adhering some to the paddle of the mixer. And then I'm just getting a good feel for how it is, and it's very slightly sticky, and it's a nice firm dough. Next, I'm going to grab the pan that we're holding it in, which I have used some butter on in the base of the pan to prevent it from sticking to the pan. Then I'm just going to roll this into the center and make a nice rounded surface, plopping it in the pan, and then I'm going to butter the top of this so that nothing dries out much, so that it doesn't make it a stiffer dough for when we're rolling it out. So we use a choice of McIntosh, Haraldson's, and Connell red apples. You can choose whichever you like, or you can use one. We like the complexity of 3 or 2 brands of apples to add to the flavor of the strudel. This is a family affair, so at this point, while the dough is resting near a heat source near the oven vent to warm, you need to incorporate your family into peeling apples so that you can get this done sooner than it would take with one person to do. We usually do between 1 and 2 gallons. This crock heaping full of apples is what we tend to use for our judging. We've lightly floured our tablecloth. You can also use a clean sheet if you choose to do so. I'm pouring out the dough onto the tablecloth, and I'm going to begin rolling it out. It's nicely warmed. It was sitting by a 350-degree oven vent while we peeled all the apples. We start by just pressing out the dough. It has a lot of elasticity, and it can be rolled out to be as thin as paper where you can see through it. So take the roller and roll as best you can, as far as you can, before you start with the hand process of pulling the dough. You can start to see through the fabric of the and colors of the tablecloth coming through the dough as it gets thinner. If when you're rolling it or pulling it, it gets to be too thin, it's easy to repair by taking a piece off the edge of the dough and using water to cover over and seal the edges to seal them together so that you don't have a big hole. So now we've rolled it out as far as we can. We're reaching underneath and leaving our hand like this to pull the dough out further. Be careful not to keep your fingers poking through the dough. Again, if you do poke through the dough, you can easily repair it by cutting an edge and making a patch using water to fill in the hole to the edges of the patch. You can see how thin the dough is getting here. You can see my fingers through the dough and the color change from the dough to the fingers. So we've stretched it out about as far as we're going to stretch it. The next steps are to add butter to the base of the stretched out dough. It's melted butter, and we just sprinkle on, adding a layer of flavor to the strudel. The next thing we're going to do is add the apples. Again, you can use 1 to 2 gallons depending on how much you want to make and how big you want your strudel to be. So we have 1 to 2 gallons of apples we're going to add. One thing we want you to realize is this is done in our home kitchen. So as long as you have a table or a counter surface to work with, you can do this in your own home. We have closer to 2.5 gallons of apples because we like a large strudel. What you start to do is add the apple slices to the edge of the strudel dough so that you're assuring that every area on the strudel gets apple. And we wanted to see if any of you recognize this song. Hopi, hopi, kuczki schnedli kropi, kuczeta se niewali, że taki nie dali. Hopi, hopi, kuczki schnedli kropi, kuczeta se niewali, że taki nie dali. That's a Czech lullaby our parents used to sing to us. Both parents were Czech descent. And they sang that to us when we were little, and I sang it to my nephews and nieces when I was babysitting. We'll get the other side there, but just so you realize what you then do with the rest of the apples is you spread it out so that there's apple coverage of the dough with apple. We have what we prefer are nutmeg and cinnamon and sugar for spices on the apple strudel. You also can add cloves, allspice, and coconut as optional additions. So I'm sprinkling on the cinnamon, making sure I get to the edges so that every area has some sort of spice on it. Adding and how much you want to add is up to your taste. Because you have many layers of apples, you want to be careful with how much you put on to make sure that you're getting through all the layers of apples to flavor everything. We're using fresh nutmeg. The apples have flavor. We tend towards light dusting of sugar. The next thing is the nuts. We prefer pecans because we have somebody in our household that gets sores in their mouth with walnuts, but walnuts were traditionally used. And again, put on as much as you'd like. Making sure you get to the edges. Wheat bran, Wheaties, cornflakes. Back in the day, they used to use stale bread to soak up the apples, and use as much as needed depending on how moist your apples were. We have some juicy apples that we peeled today, so I'm going to add a bit more of the wheat bran so that we sop up the extra juices. Yep, these are jumbo seedless raisins that we're adding. Crunch them up a little bit as you're spreading them. Make sure you get to the edges because those apples need some absorption too. To add that extra layer of flavor. I'm also going to use this butter to butter the pan to ease with removal of the strudel pieces as we cut them and eat them once they're cooked. Now comes the exciting part. Basically, you start by lifting the edge of your sheet or tablecloth and just start rolling it. Don't worry about things falling off the edge. You can pick those off the floor later. Pinch your edges as you go so that they're less likely to have things drop. You can see there's a little bit of sticking on the dough onto the strudel, onto the tablecloth. So we have it set to fold. We're going to bring it back this way. And use water to the edges of the strudel dough to seal it closed. And you wonder, how are we going to get this onto a pan? Well, we're going to fold it. And this side didn't get tucked in, so I'm going to squeeze it here now. And just use water to get your dough pieces together. And there we go. Next we're going to fold it in half. Our pan size is this size. So what we're going to do is fold this in half this way, and I'm going to have somebody help me flip it into the pan. Second, we don't have it on there. Okay, this is a big strudel. On the count of 3, we'll go that way. 1, 2, 3. And then you remove your sheet or tablecloth, and it slides into the pan. And then you top the pieces with butter for browning. It goes in a 350-degree oven for usually 2 or more hours. Check it along the way. If it's getting too brown, put a piece of foil over the top so that it doesn't keep browning and turning too dark. You'll know when it's done when a knife inserted into the thickest part comes out without resistance, and it's similar to how an apple pie would be baked. And this is what we know as our traditional Czech apple strudel. And if you have any questions, you can post them on Facebook. Hope you get the challenge to try it and enjoy. We certainly enjoy this every year. At least once or twice a year we make these. Z Panem Bohem. And this is the result of the baked strudel. It was for 1 hour and 45 minutes in the convection oven. Takes longer if you do a regular bake. And our final thanks go to our cat, Siamese Meeser boy, Henry, for staying out of trouble while we shot this video.